I started this because for so long, especially, well, 10 years that I've been involved in the arts, but for sure the last 4 years, and after the pandemic, I continually hear of nonprofit arts organizations talk about aging audiences, and they cannot figure out how to attract millennials and Gen Z. Thank you for this. It's a case study, if you will, or a work in progress that I really hope will help bridge millennials and Gen Z to the arts and
Yep.
in a relevant and meaningful way. So, having said that, just tell me a little bit about you, what you do for a living, how old you are, just so we get a sense of your demographic.
Business background, 31-year-old millennial, jock by trade, I guess, former life as a jock. And like I said, business degree. So that's kind of my demo. Family, young family, living in the suburbs. So
What was your or what is your earliest memory of engaging in art when you were growing up? Do you have one?
so you had your specials on certain days, and that was music class, gym class, and then art class. I loved and lived for special days because it was a way to exercise either performing something, whether it was gym class and playing a sport or music class. I mean, we didn't play a lot of instruments in it. We learned a lot about music. And then art class with Mrs. Tremaine was always fun because it felt like I like the expression aspect of it. So that was probably the earliest memory. And then my mom and my uncle Steve are pretty artistic. So that Galgus side, especially, um, my dad is more STEM oriented, science, math, all that kind of stuff, history. But my mom was very big into art. She would doodle a lot, and we were exposed to like my uncle Steve's work, her work. So I remember being young and being exposed to it a decent amount and having an appreciation of it because I liked the expression aspect of it.
So it's really interesting because you got very lit up when you were talking about these memories, and these memories are 6 years, 7 years, 8 years old. Were there tangible skills that you think back now that you didn't maybe realize at the time you were getting, but through
Yeah,
that?
I would say perspective. So being able to see things from a different perspective, whether that was my own artwork and maybe it was in art class in elementary school, which we weren't very thoughtful in terms of maybe uh, our dissecting of somebody else's artwork, but you could see that somebody else would have a different perspective on maybe what your art piece of art was and how they interpreted it. So I think I saw that different perspective and appreciation for people expressing themselves in different ways through, arts, performing arts, music, theater, painting, drawing. So expression, the value of expression, the ability to see somebody else's perspective and also formulate your own perspective. Obviously, just being creative in general, using a different side of your brain, and being able to um, look at something that was blank and maybe see how you could create beauty out of it. And I think that's maybe a little more like poetic or romantic version of how you can approach life. But in a lot of aspects, it could be a new job, it could be um, traveling to a new place. You can look at it with a clean slate or a blank canvas. And be kind of like the artist of your experience in that light. So I think those are some like soft skills. I think presenting the performing arts for sure, being able to speak clearly, to memorize lines, to engage an audience, that kind of stuff is definitely a soft and a hard skill. I actually, at one point, this is fast forwarding later in life, but um, early on in my career, and it's still something that I probably should think back to and maybe uh, actually look into it a little bit harder. But time starts becoming a little more fleeting when you have a family and stuff. But early on in my career, I wanted to start to get better at like public speaking. And I thought about doing like an improv class or actually going and just for fun, trying to get into theater. I actually really enjoyed the elementary school plays that I did, and I didn't get involved in it in middle school or high school in terms of like acting. But when I do look back on it, going back to your comment on like lighting up, those were some really fun memories. I loved being with my cohort of friends and trying to memorize lines, having that performance anxiety leading up to the actual performance. And I see a lot of similarity with what I ended up pursuing a lot of and spending a lot of my time on up until my young professional career, which was athletics. But I loved doing that. The preparation, so going back to skills and how that can apply to life in general, the preparation, the study, working with a team of people, whether it's on a collage or it's a play or something in band. Played the trumpet for a little bit in middle school. So those are some of the skills.
You had a great segue because I was then going to equate your experience or participation in the arts, but then you really were heavily involved in sports. And can you see any parallels between performing arts and performing in athletics?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. I think each sport's a little bit different, but I always thought the best athletes were artists in their own way. Especially like I look at soccer, which is what I ended up being able to take to the highest level and played other sports. But soccer, there's a lot more free flowing of expression. You're put into this formation. Some coaches vary their formation, but the minute you get on the field and you step in those white lines, a lot of that preparation helps, but then you have to be creative and think on the fly, problem solve, teamwork. So I see a lot of parallels, and I think the best players, the ones that are the most enjoyable to watch, are the ones that are artists on the field.
I think it's really fascinating that the first um, thought came to your mind in what you got from participating in arts in school was perspective. And then you mentioned expression and people's ability to express themselves through the arts. Because for me, that's a very outward looking, like community. It was an inward self, what
Mhm.
you selfishly got, but certainly you gained perspective, but others gained perspective. You heard others' perspective in your work, which it, isn't it wonderful to think that if we could just embrace and understand in everyday life as adults, appreciate others' expression through whatever art form, and perhaps open our mind to their perspective in
Yeah,
how they see the world or how they,
100%.
right? And
Yeah,
so
I think
that's,
too often we probably look at things, or not things, but people as two-dimensional, and that's not the right thing. Um, People are obviously complex. Being able to look at them as very multifaceted and dimensional, and to be able to do that, you have to use your senses, mainly listening, and your sight, to pick up on, nonverbal cues and whatnot. But it is, you know, to be able to look at people and understand that they have a story to tell, whether that is something that they can tell just in a, one-to-one conversation, or that story is told through some kind of art or performing arts, or, some way of expressing, whether it's music, a picture, painting, photography, theater. I think it gives you an appreciation for how complex and interesting and unique people are.
how do you spend your free time when you have it?
Yeah, free time when I have it. I've been getting back more into reading. I've never been like a voracious reader, but I love history. I love self-development. Um, I like looking at successful individuals and, biographical books to understand how they got to where they were, how they saw the world, what made them tick, so that I can take some of those good, understand the good and the bad, take some of that and apply it to myself to always get better and better. So that's something I do in my free time now. There's probably a fine line too, and maybe like a little bit of a gray area. You want it to be, I always like things that are not exclusionary, but that feel a step up. Whether it's like I don't know, a restaurant or a entertainment venue or something social you can do that feels like a step up, but is accepting and approachable. I do think that early exposure helps make you feel confident in going into different settings. I I like to at least plan or think about getting out to go to some kind of show. It doesn't even have to be theater. It could be going to a concert. It could be going to a stand-up comedy. I think there's something about going out to the performing arts maybe once a month or once a quarter that I think is really aspiring or cool, and something that I want to do and have as a practice.
Do you think ever about all traditional arts, whether it's opera or the orchestra or the ballet? Are those things that you would be open to experimenting with? Is it something that you have tried that you want to go back, or you don't have much experience? Explain a little bit to me on the more traditional classical arts.
Yeah, I would have interest in experiencing all of those. I have not experienced opera. Um, I'm sure, no, I mean, outside of like a high school orchestra performance, I don't know that I've been to, um, a classical performance like that. And I would definitely go to that. And what was the other one? So opera,
Ballet.
ballet. I actually would love to go see ballet. Um, I would love to go see like the Nutcracker. Um, so I have the interest in pursuing that. And I think those would probably be maybe a little more sparing.
Where do you get your information about those things? How could organizations reach you when they have programming out there? Do you come across that at all in any of your locations where you get content, whether it's social media or any other way?
No, I think I usually hear through word of mouth. And I think the algorithm probably catches on that that's not something that I'm typically searching. But I definitely think social media could be a good tool to leverage more so. And whether it's already being leveraged, and like I said, because of the algorithm pertaining to me on social media and my fingerprint, so to speak, um, it's not exposing me as often. But I think I actually watch more traditional like new local news every morning for like weather and traffic and all that kind of stuff and just what's going on around Columbus. And so every once in a while you'll hear stuff through that. But I think obviously being a millennial and whether it's good or bad, spending a lot of time on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X now. I think that could be a good way for me to be exposed more so to that in terms of happenings in news. Mhm.
I've actually wondered, rather than those organizations putting money toward paying Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, X for that, hire an influencer, hire someone in your age range to create content on their own platform, on their own
Yeah,
channel,
their pays.
right?
Yep.
Because it then, and I had someone else talk about, you're the third or fourth person, or all it's word of mouth and it's what you want to do with your friends. But someone, mentioned creating FOMO, and
Yep.
how can you create that FOMO when you see your friend posting something and it's like, wow, I would love to go check that out too. And so it's perhaps thinking more like a brand and how brands get their information out and how they build
Yep.
their client or audience base, if you will, that if arts could think of the same way, I often say, they spend too much time marketing to the audience they already have and not the audience that they want to have. And I think there's a balance between both of that.
Certainly, yeah. And I think I'm sure there's some campaigns, and you probably would obviously know better than me, but I know uh, what's some of the like Columbus or like the more localized Instagram accounts where they do those giveaways. I think that's a good way to
Well, that's a great idea.
build, like build that awareness. Because at the end of the day, it does come down to awareness. So I was actually thinking about this in prep for our conversation, like what could be interesting. There's these regional hubs, whether it's like retail or commercial hubs in some of these mid-sized metro areas that have the ability to, um, support and put on some of these shows. But I think that's another way to kind of leverage things. But if there's a giveaway or you have some way of um, like making that performance or that exhibit more remote or closer to where they are, the better, because right now everybody consumes so much electronically that if it's not right at their fingertips, it's a little bit harder to get them to partake or involve themselves in it.
Do you think at all about arts programs, or when you think of the arts, do you look at school to provide that? Where does that come in Beckham's life?
Yeah, I think it's all the above. We try to do as much at home as possible. We definitely want school or daycare to play a big role in that. I want school to be a big proponent of it. I want my family to expose him to that. I want us to continue to expose him to that. As long as our kid ends up having a passion, I'll be happy. If he or she finds something that they can express themselves in, that they can get totally immersed in, and it's something that is um, what's it called? That's actually like beneficial to him or to uh, family or the greater being of society. I want that to be to us to push that, and I want us to expose him to or her to all different sorts of things. So I think it's multifaceted. I think everybody plays a part in exposing and letting them do arts and crafts and music and whatnot. So we try to do it as much as possible with the time that we have with him.
Are you registered to vote?
Yes,
Do you vote? Do you
yes,
participate?
yes.
So would you support a candidate who is a proponent for more arts in education, more funding for arts education? Because as you know, or see, all of this school funding and where does it go and the push for STEM and all of these components, art has been stripped, it's been reduced. It's like the back seat of that. Now that you have a child and are looking at that, is that something that you would pay more attention to and are interested in more public investment in particularly arts in school?
Yeah, so I think that it always comes down to brass tacks, right? And it depends on what like kind of legislation, what is tied to that legislation that would help support that. But I am a proponent of that being a big focus in school. I obviously know why there's been such a push from a STEM standpoint, and I think it's great, especially with where we're going from a compute standpoint, what drives industry, what drives our nation in terms of, security and, the continued prosperity of the US and other countries as well is a lot driven by, energy independence, business and trade. But to have a thriving society and culture, the arts are a big aspect of that. So I am supportive of a candidate or somebody bringing something forth that actually, when rubber meets road, does provide value um, by pushing funding towards the arts. This type of conversation needs to be had in terms of how do we allocate funding within schools now that we are on the precipice of being a lot more powerful as a society from a science and technology and engineering
Right.
and mathematics standpoint. How do we use our right brain to problem solve better and use those soft skills from the arts that you can learn early on to think creatively? Because that's where it's going to end up. It really intrigues me to figure out how you solve it, because I think it is a necessity to solve, and I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, you've been doing a lot of studying and problem solving on it. Um, and my mind goes to like, how can you lever, like you said, um, influencers, social media. I think like each each city has its own unique challenges. And I think people are probably interested in the arts. Now, does that translate to them actually going out and spending a share of their wallet? Clearly not as much as it should be. But I don't know, has the arts community like partnered with some of the cool restaurant concepts that are here to like during restaurant week, drive performance attendance
Yeah.
by partnering with restaurants. Because that's what when I think of like something that I find, and this is more of a romantic view of it, but I would love to go grab a dinner in a suit and tie and go with maybe just my wife, but maybe it's like my wife and a close group of friends or family, grab a really good dinner at a really good restaurant that maybe we wouldn't typically dine at, or is like hard to get a reservation, and pair that with time to go see an orchestra or an opera or a play or something that is very immersive and a really cool experience. You to be a well-rounded human being and to be a creative problem solver, whatever field you end up going into, you should have some exposure to the arts, and feel comfortable around it too, right? But I think you're doing a really admirable job of advocating for this, and it's a cool conversation. I probably could go on for hours asking you questions or talking about this, because I think it's a huge cornerstone to society, and I want to see society continue to evolve in the right way. So,
Well, you are awesome. And as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking maybe it's going to be the millennials and Gen Z that will finally wake everybody up, because we have to change the way that we talk about the impact. And it's going to take an army to do it, not just one person.
yep,
So,
for sure. Well,
thank you for your
I'm sure you'll
time.
have some good conversations as this continues to evolve. So,
Yeah, and I would
yeah.
talk to you about this or anything anytime.